The scroll gives you an opportunity to look beyond the lips of the prophet into the heart and the fears and the feet of the prophet. And I think it's very, very important that we do that, because when we understand who a person is, then we can balance what they say against where they came from, how they feel, and who they really are. Sometimes our greatest messages are never in our lips. It's in our struggle, it's in our pain, it's in our problems. Our human fallacies is what connects us to people. And I think the opportunity to let people know that you're just a guy like anybody else, a person with issues and kids and crises and stresses just like them. It is our similarity to them that makes us relative to them. I don't want to be their hero. I want to be one from among them, because that's who I am.
I failed the 11th grade at a gifted and talented school where I was president of the class, and both my father and uncle were in the Hall of Fame. So it's almost the vision of Jawanza Kunjufu to be popular or to be smart, as I could do the work, but I wasn't applying myself. It's almost akin. I have a niece who just got the eye touch from her mother for her birthday. She came home angry because it had all of her games on it, Twitter, Facebook, her email, but she came home in an uproar saying, "What you gave me doesn't work." Her mother said to her, "What do you mean it doesn't work?" Says, "I got my Twitter, I got my Facebook, got my email, but it's not working." She said, "The reason why it's not working is you're not in the right area. You've got to be connected in a Wi-Fi area in order for all of the things that have been downloaded to be able to function." It's the exact same thing with my motivation in terms of academics. All the things I needed to know, everything in my environment and in my home life showed me what it is that I needed to do. I just wasn't in the right area at that time to really evolve and to mature and to develop into that place. It wasn't until after I failed the 11th grade, my parents sent me to Liberia, West Africa to finish high school. When I finished, went over to Liberia, it was an interesting thing because at that time, this is before the Civil War, Liberia didn't have a public school system. So you could have 19-year-olds in the 6th grade. You have 23-year-olds in the 10th grade, not because they were held back, not because they were intellectually challenged, but because that was the very first time they had money to go to school. So here I am sitting in the class and they're asking, how in the world did you fail for free? When it is that we have to work in order to have the access to what it is that we wanted. So it wasn't until I was connected in the right environment that I had a greater value for education and the sacrifice other people have to make in order to get it.
And when they gave my father 3 to 6 months to live, my sister lives in Jersey, we started, my parents lived in Philadelphia, we started alternating 1 week in Philly for her, 1 week in Philly for me, 1 week in Philly for her, 1 week in Philly for me, 2 weeks in Philly for her, 2 weeks for me, adjusting our schedules, and the last month being with him the whole time. Just to spend time and to look at the man that taught me about life and watching him die, teaching me how to die, had innumerable moments that I'll never forget. He said, "You know I'm dying, boy." I said, "Yes, sir, I know you die. I'm gonna be with you when you die." "Good, I want you with me when I die." The doctor saying give him whatever he wants. I did the cooking. Daddy did all the cooking as we were growing up, so he taught us how to cook. And give him whatever he wants, even though his system can't handle it. He's got pancreatic cancer. It doesn't matter. He's dying. So Every night, Daddy took medicine, OxyContin, at 7 in the morning, 3 in the afternoon, 11 o'clock at night. Every night I'd ask him, what you want tomorrow? And he'd give me his menu. I said about the business of preparing it. One night he told me he wanted lamb chops. Now I should have gone to the farmer's market. My father was country, as you know, and being country, he went to the farmer's market twice a week. He didn't like stuff in the freezer. He got fresh vegetables, he got fresh. And when I went to the farmer's market, they knew I was Jeremiah's boy. And I'm trying to get chicken over here. They said, no, he gets his chicken over there. He gets his dairy here, his eggs. But I should have gone to the farmer's market and got lamb chops, and I didn't. I looked in the freezer and there was some lamb chops in the freezer, so I took them out. Next morning they hadn't thawed, so I put them in a pot of water. Both of my parents had pacemakers, which meant no microwaves in the house. So I put them in a pot of water, kept putting hot water and trying to thaw them. 4:15, my mother comes to the kitchen. Daddy's in a hospital bed in their bedroom. He'd get up, come to the table for dinner and breakfast and so forth. My mother comes to the kitchen. She said, well, you know, we normally eat at 4:30 around here, but I guess ain't nobody eating today because I don't see nothing on the table. So I said, Mom, Daddy wanted lamb chops and they hadn't thawed. They're in the oven now and he can't eat rare. So I'm waiting for them to get ready. 4:30, she's back in there. Well, ain't gonna be no dinner at 4:30 today. I don't see nothing on the table yet. I said, Mommy, everything's ready except the lamb chops, waiting for the lamb chops. 4:45, she's back. You know, when you get to be old like me and your daddy, your bodies get on certain schedules, and if they get thrown off, you just messed up. You know, because normally we be finished eating right about now, and then we watch Jeopardy, Wheel Watcher, and Jag, and then we go to bed. But that ain't gonna happen tonight because I don't see nothing on the table tonight. 5 o'clock, dinner's ready. I get Daddy into the table. She fussed all the way through dinner, man. She fussed. So that night I asked Daddy, what you want tomorrow? He told me, and man, I busted my hump to make sure it was ready at 4:15. My mother took a nap and she didn't wake up till 5:30 and never said a word, never said a word. So that night, I was taking him his medicine at 11 o'clock. And he said, what's wrong with you, boy? Now, this is about a month before he died. I said, nothing. He said, don't lie to me. What's wrong? I can look at your face and see something wrong with you. I said, nothing, Daddy, I'm fine. He said, I've known you all your life. What is wrong? I said, did you hear Mommy yesterday fussing at me about dinner not being ready at 4:30? I said, Daddy, I busted my hump today trying to make sure it was ready on time so you all could eat on your regular schedule. She slept to 5:30 and she didn't say a word. He started scratching. He said, you see what I've been putting up with for 63 years? Well, see, that kind of humor and fun and laughter as he's dying is a glimpse of countless scenarios that impacted and changed me forever. Before he lapsed into a coma, he got some source of unknown strength. My sister came running to get me. She said, would you go tell Daddy? Daddy is ripping, not taking off, but ripping his Depends down the middle. Now, Daddy was so weak that we'd have to take him up out of bed and put him on the porta potty, put him back in. But he has strength to rip a Depend. I mean, that's like a diaper. I don't mean where you connect it. He's ripping it in the middle. He's exposing himself. So I went in there. I said, Daddy, what are you doing? I got to get dressed. Bring me my brown suit. I said, Daddy, your brown suit? What brown suit? The same color as your brown suit. It's in my closet. Bring me my brown suit. I brought the suit back. I said, this is the suit? Yeah, now hang it up. I said, there's no place to hang it in here, Daddy. Put it on the chair where I can see it. Put it right there. I said, Daddy, why are you exposing it? I'm getting dressed. Bring me some underwear and get me a shirt out the top drawer and a tie to match that. So I said, Daddy, you don't let me get dressed and lie in bed fully clothed. He said, you're not going where I'm going. I said, where are you going? He said, I'm going to heaven. I can't go to heaven in no pajamas and Depends. I gotta be dressed up. I said, yes, sir. Now, sidebar. My close friend I mentioned earlier, who's an AME Zion bishop, when I shared with him what my daddy said, Daddy said, you're not going where I'm going. My friend said, he meant ever. He didn't mean that day. He meant you ain't ever going there. But Within 30 minutes, he just slumped and never regained consciousness. Well, we had a baby monitor next to his bed. We had a bell that he'd ring it if he needed anything. So that from Sunday until Tuesday, he was just breathing is all you could hear coming across the baby monitor. My wife flew in when I told her the hospice nurse said he was actively dying. So she and I, on July 4th, I went to Walmart and bought a little portable grill so we could have a little cookout for my mom and my wife, her sister and her husband. And in the evening, my wife and I were sitting on the living room floor watching a blockbuster movie on my laptop. My sister and her husband were in the kitchen with Mommy. Mommy got up and walked into the bedroom, and we could hear her on the baby monitor. And she says, "Children, come here. I have a feeling." Computer now, we go in there. She said, "Let's have prayer." So I was standing at the head of the bed with Dad, right here. His head was right here. I took my wife's hand. She took my sister's hand. Her husband took my mother's hand. And my mother prayed, and she thanked God for a good husband. She thanked God for a good father. She thanked God for a good pastor. And she said, "Amen." And she said, "You can go now, honey." He took 3 breaths. Now I'm holding a hand on the hospital bed looking at my watch. So I moved my hand from the top of his head down to his carotid artery and watched his chest. At the end of 3 minutes, I said, "Mommy, he hadn't breathed in 3 minutes and there's no pulse." She said, "I know, he's gone." Called the hospice people to come remove the body. And I called home. Reverend Barbara Allen, my executive minister, said to me, they weren't joined at the hip, they were joined at the heart. She had a feeling that he was getting ready to die from the kitchen. Now, scenes like that, I mean, those are forever kind of imprinted in the DNA of your spirit, and they were replicated with my father-in-law dying in my home where he died, and my mother. I was by her bedside when she died in 2005. Those are life-changing, defining moments that these are the people that taught you about faith and hope. And in fact, you asked a question about liberation theology. When Daddy was dying, he said, I was on a radio station here in the city of Philadelphia for 20-some years. And the owner sold the station, or was bought out by some white investors out of New York, Christian white station. And my father said to me, "You know them white people ain't gonna leave you on that radio station telling the truth you tell, don't you?" I said, "Yes, sir, I know that." He said, "Don't stop telling it though. Don't stop." And sure enough, within a week, they sent us our money back, told us to find a new station. But to have the people that taught you, and they were born and raised in a segregated South. And so faith for them was not some sort of abstract ideation or ideological construct. It was a lived reality. To have them teach you about life and then teach you about death. To have them teach you about life as a black person in this country, but a citizen of another country. Those are unforgettable experiences.
Wow, divorce is something that I wish that no one have to go through. I don't think no one gets married with the intentions on getting a divorce. And I wouldn't wish divorce on my worst enemy. It's something that, no one should experience. It was a hard time for me, because again, I did not marry to divorce. But one thing I did learn, going through the process of divorce, sometimes in the church, I think we marry without the knowledge and wisdom of marriage. I think we go into marriage blindly. When I was coming up in church, you know, all we heard is better to marry than burn, you know, and so we didn't want to go to hell, you know, so we was like, okay, we don't want to continue to commit fornication or any sexual sins, so let's go ahead and get married. We didn't marry for love. We didn't really marry. I think one of the reasons why we didn't marry for love, because we didn't even understand love. We wasn't taught love. We, you know, especially in the church, we as men, we're never taught how to love a woman. We're taught how to love God. But no one sits us down to teach us how we are supposed to love a woman and how a woman is supposed to actually love a man. So a lot of things within the church, we learn the natural things of life, we learn in the streets. We learn in school, you know, we learn from our friends, you know, and I really believe that it's time that the church begin to teach the natural things of life. I now don't believe that you should marry for love. And I teach that to my marriage ministry. And when I first taught it, everybody was like, but this is what I mean by that. I teach that you marry, or you should marry, for a relationship. Not relations, but relationship. I really believe that the greater the relationship or the better the relationship, that the relationship produces the love. A lot of people marry for love, but they don't have no relationship. How I came up with that concept, I remember sitting in court with my mom and my dad. And I remember my mom and my dad both saying to each other, I love you, but I can't stay with you. And all of my life, I never understood that. I remember crying, saying, if y'all love each other, why y'all can't stay together? And it wasn't until I got grown, and it wasn't until I got into my marriage, until I realized why they couldn't stay together. Is because they did not have a relationship. My dad loved my mom, but they didn't have no relationship, and the love could not grow because they did not have a relationship. They did nothing together. I often tell our married people that the same things that you all used to do before you got married, while you was boyfriend and girlfriend, you got to do that now. You have to date, you have to give cards, you have to give flowers. You know, before I got married, I used to talk to my ex-wife before we got married. We talked 50 times a day. After we got married, that ceased. We used to give cards, we used to give flowers, we used to just walk, you know, laugh. We used to go away. I mean, most times when people get married, all of that ceases. There's no relationship. And then I bring that into the church. I bring it spiritual. You know, the reason why I fall in love with Jesus over and over every day is because of our relationship. Our relationship get better and better every day, every hour. And the tighter the relationship, the more I fall in love with them. And so I teach married couples, don't so much concentrate on the love. Concentrate on the relationship. And when you guys have a solid, tight relationship, whatever it takes to make your relationship work and make it better, trust me, the relationship will produce the love.
When my ministry was probably at its apex, I was building the church in Dallas. My television ministry was exploding. We were in demand all across the world. And I was building the largest facility I had ever built, $45 million facility. And my mother had a brain tumor that later developed into Alzheimer's, and she was going down while the building was going up, and I couldn't stop either one of them. And I was trapped between the two. So I moved her into my house, and I would run out and preach on Sunday, then do the television, and all the things that made people either love me or critics hate me because they were envious of what they thought was a great moment, and then come home and try to get her to remember how to swallow applesauce. And it was a very, very difficult time in life. Very, 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 very difficult. Anybody who's ever lived with an Alzheimer's patient would be the only ones to really understand how traumatic that can be, because they die maybe 1,000 times before they die. They die in little pieces of memories and thoughts and reflections, and finally they get to the point that they look in the mirror and say, "Who is that lady?" And to stand there and be faithful through that was very, very difficult, and then be very important in public and very available for people who had far less problems and needed you to encourage them. And you went home to problems that were far worse, and nobody encouraged you because they thought you were just fine. It was a very difficult period. It strengthened me. I made it. My mother sat at the table in one of her more lucid moments, and she told me, she said, "Tommy." I said, "What, Mama?" She said, "Every story don't have no happy ending." And to watch her fade away and still try to warn me that this wasn't going to be a success. So people say you're successful. What is success? It depends on what your goal is. It's not a watch, a ring, or a size church, or a company, or business. For me, I was failing because I was losing somebody I was loving. At the same time, I was building something that was demanding, and I couldn't stop either one.
I have 6 children and a wonderful wife. And children have a way of pressing the buttons and doing the things that can be very dramatic. And I've had a few of those experiences in my life. One is just having one of my teenage daughters, one of my daughters when she was a teenager, get pregnant when she was very young. That was traumatic for me. It sucked the life out of me that happened to her. I know in this culture today, that's probably become the norm, but it was something that totally caught me by surprise. It was unexpected of me. I didn't expect it to happen, and so it caught me off guard. And it really, for the first time in my life, as a pastor of a mega church, leading all of these people and teaching people how to raise their kids, yet to have this experience crop up in my life that my own daughter had gotten pregnant and was not married, and she was a teenager, was, for me, traumatic. But I remember getting a call from my pastor at that time, Bishop Jakes, who's my pastor, who really ministered life to me and gave me hope. And he shared his own experience in that arena and how he gave me the ability to have an understanding that I would make it through it and that I would be able to overcome it. And I did. And so now that daughter has matured and gone to college and graduated, and that child is 5 years old now and a wonderful grandchild. The reality is 1,000 thoughts went through my mind. What would people say? How could I continue to lead? What would I say to other people? How could I be preaching and teaching others when I had a failure of my own? But then I began to understand something with the months that were ahead, that the power of the message is not in my life. It's not in me. The power is in God's truth. And so, was I worried about what people said? Absolutely. And I remember the night we decided to make the announcement to the church. I decided to be proactive and announce to the congregation instead of them hearing it through scuttlebutt through the church. And I remember when that night came, it was a Tuesday night during our prayer time. I decided to announce it to the prayer people who came to prayer service at our church. And just before I made the announcement, I had told the leaders of our church prior to that moment. And just before we made the announcement, one of our elders of our church, one of the leaders, said he wanted to do something before I made the announcement. And he called the church together to gather around me. And he reaffirmed his support of me as the pastor and reaffirmed the love for me as the pastor. It was the most moving moment to have the leaders of the church and the congregation surround me and surround my wife and I and actually pray for us. They were so understanding and compassionate. And the thing is, many of them in the congregation had already experienced that, and they understood it. And they understood that, you know, adults can't make decisions for their kids. All we can do is teach them what's right and model before them what's right. And even with doing that, sometimes they can make bad choices. But we're still called to love them and still to care for them. And that's what we did. And likewise, that congregation loved us and served us. It was a most moving moment in the history of our church and in the history of my life. I will never forget how they supported me and my family during that time.
Man, the last 4 years have been bittersweet. In the last 4 years, I've lost 4 of the most important people in my life. My natural father passed away 4 years ago, Henry Louis Sapp. 30 days after that, my musical mentor passed away. 30 days after that, my spiritual father passed away. So 4 years ago, going on 5 years ago, 3 of the most important people in my life died in 90 days. And you talk about a difficult experience. And believe it or not, the song Never Would Have Made It was really birthed out of that situation. Because that song is what actually got me through all of my crises. When my father passed away, man, I thought I was gonna lose my mind. And because I was not just his son, I was his pastor. So I had to be his pastor. I had to commit him to the ground. I had to go to the funeral home. I had to do all the stuff that a pastor would have to do for his father. And the Sunday after I buried him, I walked in my church with tears rolling down my face, and I stood in the pulpit, and I usually sing a fast song called I'll Praise You. But this Sunday I walked in and I just started singing those words. I never would have made it. Never could have made it without you. I'd have lost my mind. But now I see how you've been there for me. And after this, I'm gonna be stronger, wiser, and better. And that was the first time I sung Never Would Have Made It. It was the first Sunday in October, almost 5 years ago. And now, the rest is history. I've been singing it every day, every city I go to since. And I think that's the key thing we must realize, is that all of us have had never would have made it moments. And that's why so many people are connected to that song. And man, great story, great time, bittersweet memories, but thank God for his grace.
In our struggles as a people, particularly here in New York, we've been faced with several atrocities. One was Abner Louima, another one was Doris Ma, another one was, there are many. And during the time that Rudolph Giuliani was mayor, he and I ran into big conflicts because I thought that he was insensitive, and I thought that he handled the situations poorly. I thought he always sided with the police and never with the people. I thought that, and I just one day just absolutely flat out called him a racist, and I still believe that he is. During that time, there were very high emotions and a building tension in our city between the mayor and the police and the black community, to the point where there was going to be a huge explosion in the streets. Cardinal O'Connor invited everyone to St. Patrick's Cathedral for a prayer meeting. Giuliani was there, police commissioner, myself. There was a Catholic priest who was preaching, a black priest. And he was preaching about reconciliation. And he was saying, what will you offer? What will you offer? It was a good sermon. It was a good sermon. I'll call his name Father Good. It was a good sermon, Good, if you're seeing this. And I was convicted by the power of his message. And I knew that reconciliation was the Christian thing. And I knew also that in the history not only of our city, but of our nation, that the one thing that African Americans had always possessed was the high ground. Martin Luther King Jr., Adam, we always took the high ground. So I saw the Giuliani sitting out there, racist that he is. And I said, well, you know, Butch, I'm listening to Good saying, what will you offer? What will you give? And so when Good finished, I stood up and I extended my hand to Giuliani, thinking maybe if I take the high ground, I can help lift him to that position. Didn't do any good. He still remained intransigent. He still remained the racist that he is. He still took a kind of negative position. And so sometimes, you know, you can extend that hand of love and reconciliation.
You will enjoy the beauty of Africa, not only in the cosmopolitan, the sophisticated cities, the rural areas, and of course the wilderness and the bush, the diverse nature of Africa. People only, try to view Africa in a myopic way. They treat the continent as if it's one country, whether it was several countries. So I served in the southeastern corner, Botswana, Mozambique, Lesotho, and Swaziland. The pandemic of AIDS met us in 2000 when we went to serve in that southeast section. I believe at the time there was like 7,000 people dying of AIDS on a regular basis. It wasn't that they weren't addressing the topic. I believe that there had to be more than just information, telling people how you contract AIDS, how to protect yourselves, and being able to reduce it or present it in such a way that it made sense. What I'm saying is that you have people who make $100 a month, $100 a month to feed themselves and their family, and you're trying to help them take a $5 pill. A $5 pill, when you're making $100 a month, that's tough. The expert says you need to have rubber gloves. You're talking about people who barely have shoes, that they need to buy rubber gloves. You have to separate when children are born. You can't put the delivering mother in the same bed where there's a person with HIV/AIDS positive or who's suffering from the ravages of AIDS in the same bed. There's only one bed in the house. You can't wash your clothes and the clothes of the family in the same pot that you cook the rice. There's only one pot. So, how do we reach beyond that to be able to help people? And so one of the life-changing things was going to a day center for children for babies and infants who are orphaned by AIDS, whose the proprietors were hoping that people in the United States will adopt the children. AIDS was still such a mystery then. Human sexuality was not an openly discussed subject, not even between husbands and wives. So convincing my pastors and convincing my missionaries that we're going to this place, and there are babies who have AIDS or HIV positive, and we're going to bathe them, and we're going to dress them, and we're going to sing songs to them, and we're going to pray for them, and we're going to take care of them and hope that they live. And so we did. And so Children who may have been left on the doorstep or under a bush or a tree with the expectation to die. Holding that child in your arms and praying that that child will live, and hoping that you have enough money to be able to help these people take care of those children for a lifetime. So we built an orphanage for children who have been abandoned by AIDS, not because their parents didn't love them, but because their parents were too sick. We built 3 group homes for children who are orphaned by AIDS in Mabani, Swaziland. We started out with 12 children. My predecessors, Bishop Sarah Davis and Bishop E.R.O. McLeod, have grown those houses. There are now 36 children. And we take care of them. They have house parents. They eat, they sleep. They have, we pay their school fees, their uniforms, trying to give them a shot at life. And you say, that's 36 children. There are going to be tens of thousands of children who are going to form a mighty army of children who grew up without love, children who did not have a childhood. If we could touch 36, then we can change the lives of 36. We might be able to change, the world, might be able to change the world. The first 12 children we had was an 11-year-old girl who had AIDS. Her mother and father both died of AIDS, and the family kept her locked up in a closet. They would put food outside the door and knock on the door, and she would eat the food and be locked up because nobody knew how you could catch AIDS. They were afraid that if her parents died, they would die too. Our missionaries found her and brought her to the house. She lived with us for about 2.5 years before she died. But the 2.5 years she had classmates, she had housemates, she had house parents, and she didn't have to live in a closet. It's one child at a time. One child at a time.
I have gone to the morgues with mothers to identify the bodies of their children. I remember when Doris' mom, to actually watch them bring a body out and almost like a refrigerated box, and you see the bullet wounds and the body's nude, and the mother, they say, is this yours? And she just falls apart. I've gone through that several times. But out of all of the cases that I've fought, I think the one that got me the most was Sean Bell. And I think the reason it got me is this was a kid who had made mistakes, had 2 children, and was marrying the mother. And the police killed him on the morning of the wedding. And when his fiancée, Nicole, called Reverend Timothy Wright, the gospel singer, to reach me, and I got to the hospital. She didn't even know if he was living or dead. And I saw her, and later that day met her 2 little children, and then met his parents who had prayed him through. I don't think that any case was more personal to me than that. I got to know that family well, and they become like my family. A lot of it is because of how that case touched me. Maybe it was because I saw in him a kid that like the kids I grew up with that needed a second chance, and when he did it, they killed him then. Maybe it was because there was no guilt found, like we were worthless. Maybe it was because I saw in Nicole raising those 2 kids like my mother raised me and my sister with no father. There's a lot of things that came together. I've gone through probably the test of most humans would not want. I've been almost killed, I've been incarcerated. So past that, and I've been publicly scandalized in media. So past that, other than dying, I don't know what you can do. I can say that I've had my feelings hurt behind closed doors. I've been hurt, I've been agitated, I've been brought to the point of really feeling deceived and hurt, shattered, even though you don't show it in public. But I've never, ever thought about giving up. I can honestly say I've cried, I felt wounded, I felt betrayed, I felt wronged, but I've never felt like I was doing something that was worthless and that I wish I hadn't done this or that I want to stop. Never.
The aftermath of Hurricane Katrina was a difficult time in my life. Again, seeing everything that you worked so hard for gone. I had to preach in New Jersey that Monday night of the hurricane. I didn't want to preach. My wife had to tell me, look, you got to go. You made a commitment to do it. And so we flew to New Jersey, and I saw the church on television underwater all the way up to the roof. I remember in the hotel room bowing on my knees, saying, Lord, I don't understand. I mean, I've been faithful, I've been dedicated, I've been a man of integrity. How could this happen to me? And I remember God speaking to me at that particular time, and he said, Paul, do you trust me? Man, I was crying. I said, Lord, you know I trust you. He said, this is what I'm going to do. I will make your latter greater than your former. There was something about that promise. Now, you've got to think about the difficult things now that you had to deal with, because it wasn't like, you know, when I first started pastoring, I was in my 20s. So, I mean, any mountain, I could, in my 20s, my 30s, I could do it. But now I'm 55 years old. How do you start all over at 55? I mean, God, you just said my latter is going to be greater than my former. Now, you do know my former was awesome. I mean, the Lord had blessed my ministry, mega ministry. God had been good to me, and you're going to make my latter greater than my former. But guess what? Every day, God is proving himself to me. You know, it started in 2005, 55 years old. The Lord led us to start a ministry in Atlanta, Georgia. There was one young man that I pastored in New Orleans. He had moved to Atlanta years before. So God had blessed him so in Atlanta, Georgia. When we moved, we were able to lease. It was an old Kroger's supermarket. We were able to lease that, but it had a lot of work to be done on it. Tyler Perry, that's who I'm talking about, from New Orleans, a member of our church in New Orleans. He walked in, saw how raggedy the place was. Right then and there, wrote a check for $500,000. Said, I want to help with the renovations to get it rolling. I knew then God was putting something in place for this place that we're leasing, and that we're able to renovate this for the people to come. Because, you know, I was used to nice places, and God said, look, I'm not going to give you nothing raggedy. I mean, if your latter is going to be greater than your former, I got to show you. And we watched the people come. We watched the growth of that ministry. And of course, you know, we knew that we couldn't stay there. It was a lease. They didn't want to sell. And God told us about getting new property. And the only problem was it was a $21 million project. Now, how do you, when a church is just 2 years old, invest in a $21 million project? But look how God had planned it again with Brother Tyler. He, on the same grounds, we met on the same day. I didn't know he was going. He didn't know I was going. He was trying to buy one end of the property, and I was trying to buy the other end of the property for church. He wanted one end for his studio. I wanted the other end for the church. We met on the same day. I got there first, and I appreciate the realtor for being honest. And he told Tyler Perry, he said, you know, I'm sorry. There's a preacher from New Orleans. He's already put in a bid for the property. And so he was first, and I got to honor that. Tyler said, oh, I know who that is. Preacher from New Orleans, that's my pastor. And so immediately Tyler called me, and he said, look, are you trying to get some property on Greenbrier? Well, I already told my people to keep their mouth shut, because I teach that. I said, what property? Oh, you know what property I'm talking about on Greenbrier. Are you trying to get that? I said, yes, I am. He said, I am too. Let's work together on this. So we really didn't have the money for the down payment. All the realtor had to do was go a little further. He would have known, you just talking faith, because you ain't got no money to put down on this $21 million project. But what Brother Tyler did, because he was buying the other end and paying cash for his end, he said, look, let my down payment, the money that I'm giving, also be the down payment for your land. So that's how we was able to get it. The building was almost 80% finished, nothing but God. So what God was doing, he was showing me that he was making my latter greater than my former. And now we're at our new property. I tell you, God is such an awesome, it's amazing, all of the acres that God has given to us because we have trusted God. And of course, Brother Tyler has given millions of dollars since then. The church is just growing by thousands. God is blessing in Atlanta, but also now we're back in New Orleans. God gave us double for our trouble. See, you can't mess with God. He'll actually give you double for your trouble. They said we'll never succeed in New Orleans again. Now my wife has headed up that ministry. We serve as each other's co-pastors, and it's so unique. We call it one church in two states, and we're changing the way we do church. But the bottom line is, and I want people to understand, it was all based on a promise from my Father. I believe God when he said that he was going to make my latter greater than my former.
Well, love is central and love is principal to the human existence. Indeed, and in fact, it has to be, because first of all, God is love. And if he is the creator of human beings and he put us in a social matrix, then we have to understand that relationship becomes the most critical piece of our existence. First of all, the whole Bible is a book of relationships. I told you what my hub was, for God so loved the world. And this becomes a substratum and actually the fuel and the energy that brings God into man's sphere after man has fallen. But if you check the 10 Commandments, you will find that 6 to 4, it is in how we treat each other. And it's very, very critical, because I can't even declare my love for God without my love for the individual around me. So consequently, the Greeks have love in 4 different stages. They have, number 1, they have agape, which is divine love. They have eros, which is sexual or heterosexual love or human love. And then thirdly, they have storge, which is family love. They have phileo, which is brotherly love. Those are the 4 principles. They have others, but those are the 4 principles. And so when you understand that where there's no family affection, where there is no storge, there is complete imbalance in the human environment and the human experience. And that's why we have the kind of turmoil that we have in families. And when families break down, whole societal structure falls apart. Then if the family does not give you the right kind of upbringing and teach you the right kind of setting for love and the security that comes from it and the self-expression and the sharing that comes from it, then it disqualifies you for the next level. Phileo becomes more difficult when storge was not present. Where storge and phileo is not present, then eros abounds, because now we operate simply out of our lust because we have no attachments. You see, love should always be the substratum of even sex, because what it says is that sex should always be in the context of love, and love and sex should always be expressed in family, so that kids don't ever believe that they can indulge in a sexual situation unless it is embedded and surrounded and encased by love in a familial situation. And then, of course, if we understand those loves, then we can grasp the love of God to a great extent, even though it far exceeds the loves that I just mentioned. When you talk about agape, now you're talking about subjectivity, love out of a strength that has nothing to do with the object. So indeed and in fact, from when he talked about the art of loving, and he placed it in a relational or a relationship environment, in a family environment, and you can't miss it. That's what it's about. And many times when we love people, we love them out of subjective deficiencies, and we don't. In fact, many of us don't even love objectively, because we can't even figure out why we love somebody.
How have I failed as a pastor? My son's godmother, her name was Jean. Jean had been ill, had cancer, in and out of the hospital, back and forth, back and forth. And one Sunday, she came back to church after being in the hospital for quite a while. It was a great time of celebration. People were rejoicing. People were celebrating, great high time in the Lord. And in the middle of that service, I stood up and I said, "Thus saith the Lord." She was sitting about 3 or 4 rows on the left-hand side. I said, "Jean, thus saith the Lord. The Lord said, your sickness is not unto death." Man, the house went up. They shouted, they celebrated, they danced up and down the house. We shouted, we praised God. About a month later, Jean goes to the hospital. A few weeks after that, Jean dies. She died, man. My daughter comes to me with tears flowing down her eyes, and she says, "Daddy, Daddy." She said, "Daddy, I don't understand. What happened?" She said, "Daddy, I don't understand." Tears just flowing. She said, "I don't understand." She said, "Daddy, you said that God said Auntie Jean wasn't going to die." And now tears are in my eyes. And I looked my baby in the eye and I said, "Sweetheart, Daddy was wrong. I was wrong." But not only had I said that to her, I said it to thousands of people in our church. Well, the next Sunday, I have to stand up before these people. And I have to admit to them, I was wrong. God didn't say it, I said it. I failed as a prophet. I failed as a pastor. I failed as the father of that house. I said something that I said God said that God had not said. That was a failure.
Everybody got a testimony. I'm pretty sure we all know how the story ends. John 14:6 explained it to us. So the word said it. So that settles it. Be encouraged, people of God. God is the way, he's the truth, he's the life. You know what I'm saying? You gotta try. I turn on the news, I wonder why another brother had to die.